Hello, sexy citizens, and welcome back to the Dotson Show. Hey, today let's talk about campaign finance reform. It really is one of the most important topics because it's in a function. Every other topic is a function of campaign finance reform. First of all, we've got to get the money out of politics of buying our elected officials. Let's go through a scenario. Let's say, for example, in today's exorbitant world of high finance and political elections, that you need maybe $100 million to win a presidential campaign. So let's look at two scenarios of raising that kind of ridiculous amount of money. Let's say that you have 1 million of your followers contribute $100 each. No big deal to any one of them. $100 times $1 million people gives you $100 million. Or what if one wealthy person, say, I don't know, from Las Vegas, writes a $100 million check? Both raise $100 million, but think about that. What kind of influence do you think you and I, as the average citizen, would have by writing a $100 check to our elected official? First of all, we're one of 1 million people who did that. Versus a person who wrote a $100 million check. Don't you think that no matter what that wealthy billionaire wants, that elected official is pretty much owned by them? That's a very sad state of affairs in a democracy or a republic or any type of free society. In fact, it pretty much eliminates there actually being a democracy or a republic. What's even worse is a lot of major corporations or individuals through 501c4s, which I'll explain in a moment, the super PACs, they actually do this for both sides of the candidates. Both candidates. In other words, if there's a Democrat and Republican running in a certain election, presidential, congressional, very important election, they simply donate millions of dollars, sometimes tens of millions of dollars, to the Democratic candidate and do the same thing to the Republican candidate. Meaning, people think, why would they do that? They're not going to win. Well, they win exceedingly. They win no matter what, because no matter who wins, they own that politician. That's what's happening in our country, and that's what's been happening for years, and that's the reason that you and I, as the average citizen, the constituents of all these elected officials, don't no longer have a voice in Washington. It's really pretty scary. I mean, these people can go and create these super PACs. They don't even have to disclose who they are or how much money they've contributed or what they want. That sounds it's very, very secretive, and it sounds very much like anything but a free society. Let me explain in a moment. Just without getting too boring, in the IRS code, there's a section called the 501c area. There's a 501c3, which actually is a good thing. It's usually for nonprofits. Let's say you wanted to raise some money for breast cancer research, or to fight AIDS, or to do something to help children, whatever, a good cause. By having the 501c3 status, the people who made donations to your very good charity would be able to deduct that amount from their taxes, making a tax-deductible donation, which actually gives them an incentive, maybe an additional incentive, to contribute to your charity. That's a good thing. Right next to that in the code is the 501c4, and although they sound alike and structurally are initially created the same way, they couldn't be further from the intentions of what they ultimately do and result in our society. 501c4 essentially is the gateway to the super PACs, as many people have heard. 501c4 gives you the ability to set up a fund where people can contribute limited amounts, or excuse me, there is no limit on the amount of money that they can contribute, and there is no disclosure as to who these people are and what they want and what they're doing involved with our elected leaders. This is very much parallel to people that want to work as lobbyists. Now, lobbying is a right guaranteed to each of us as citizens of the First Amendment for the right to have our grievances heard. But professional lobbyists who use millions and millions of dollars of influence is not the same as you and me lobbying. But this 501c4 goes a step forward and allows them to directly input unlimited amounts of money with no disclosure to our elected politicians, and I'll let you tell me whether you think they have undue influence or just outright control of our politicians, and that's what's happening. So to talk about other issues when they've already been, so let's say if we want to talk about energy policy, well, it's ridiculous for us to even put that up if they've been if say a major oil person has contributed $10 million to their campaign. We're not even going to have a chance to get the ear of that politician because they've already been bought off. And that's one example. It could be numerous others in every other industry, military industrial complex, pharmaceuticals. Think of all the major donors who can now give money in unlimited amounts with no disclosure whatsoever, how easy it is to buy out these politicians. So until we get this under control, really talking about other issues, I won't say it's a moot point, but we're certainly going to have limited success in our ability to get the ear of our congressman or woman or the president or the vice president or anyone else that we're trying to talk to as members of their constituencies. So we have to have some type of reform. One that's been suggested, and I think is a pretty good idea, at least as a starting place for the debate on the subject, is to have taxpayer-funded elections. But, well, that's going to add to our debt. Well, hold on. First of all, it really doesn't add very much. We're talking about a few, maybe several $1,000,000 in a multi-trillion-dollar budget. Also, if we're going to get that budget under control, we're not going to be able to make any headway unless we are able to have influence with our politicians. So if we just look at it purely on a fiscal investment, return on investment type of scenario, if we can invest as taxpayers and have honest elections, a few $1,000,000, even several $1,000,000, to get a hold of the $1 trillion deficit, that's a pretty good investment purely from a fiscal standpoint. But if we look at getting control of our elected officials who are supposed to be, by law and by constitution, representing us, if we can get honesty in our elections, that's worth even more than the return on investment from a monetary standpoint. Let's say, for example, we've got 300 million, let's say it's 311, but somewhere around 300 million, for easy math, citizens in this country. Well, maybe you have to, any crazy person that wanted to run for president couldn't go and get taxpayered funds from the government. They would have to show some type of support, a base of support, where they would actually have any semblance of electability to the office. So maybe, for example, and I'm just starting it off for debate, maybe it's 500,000 signatures. That's less than 1/6 of 1% of the entire electorate. So I don't think that's a very large number. Maybe it's 1,000,000. I don't know. Something where it's a large number of signatures, but is a very small fraction of the number of votes they would need to garner to win the office in the first place. So it's certainly a doable number. And if we could argue that if a candidate cannot get those types of those numbers of supports for their election, they really don't have a campaign to begin with. So let's say it's maybe 500,000. So they go out getting 500,000 signatures. Now, what does that give them? That gives them access to a pool of funds set up equally from our taxpayers, for our government, for anyone seeking the presidency, maybe a senatorial office, access to campaign finance, and that no one can opt out of this, and that no one would be able to get funds outside of that other than their own money to run their own campaign, so that we could eliminate the very, very wealthy people who are buying off campaigns and elections, and thus our elected officials. So once they are able to prove that they have the genuine support needed, whether that's 500,000 signatures or 1,000,000 signatures, whatever it turns out to be, then they now have access to campaign finance dollars given by the taxpayers, where we now know who they're going to be loyal to. We could also create a situation where maybe the networks who are airing some of the most trivial, irrelevant political stories might actually give any candidate who's matched or maintained or reached this level of so many followers behind them, where they can get the general campaign finance funds, would also have access to so much time free on the airwaves of various networks to put out their campaign, and not in stupid little 30-second sound bites that tells that the other person's a horrible person and that person is running is wonderful, but to actually lay out what their campaign would be, actually lay out what initiatives they want to implement, what platforms they're running on, what laws they would want to implement once and if elected. These would be important things to know. This would help our society. This would help the general populace. It would certainly make a more educated electorate. All kinds of good possibilities here, and eliminates all the money in campaign, which are just simply buying off our elected officials. Here's another example before we finish up on this topic today. Let's look at the Las Vegas billionaire who contributed all that money to Newt Gingrich. Some would argue that Newt really never had a substantial campaign that might have challenged Mitt Romney. But there are people, and I'm not saying because I don't know, but certainly there have been people far more experienced than me in political campaign strategy that have said that they seriously believe, and it's shown now, that this billionaire in Las Vegas supported Mitt Romney. So the question is, so why would he give money to $10 million, maybe more, we don't know, to Newt Gingrich? Many people have said they really believe the reason he funded, in addition to Mitt Romney's campaign, the reason he funded Newt Gingrich was to give competition to Rick Santorum. Rick Santorum, at one point in the election, was the most serious competition to Mitt Romney. So if you can split Rick Santorum's vote amongst Rick Santorum and Newt Gingrich, then that lessens the competition that Mitt Romney would have from Rick Santorum. Again, I'm not sure. This is speculation, but this is speculation from political campaign strategists who have been around for decades and in numerous campaigns that know what they're talking about. Anyway, they contend that if you noticed, as soon as Rick Santorum dropped out of the race, the funding for Newt Gingrich also dried up. Could be a coincidence, or it could corroborate their plausible explanation of simple campaign strategy. And these types of things, if they didn't happen in this particular race, are certainly susceptible to happening because of the way the campaign election and collection of dollars is run today. It's simply an office up for the highest bidder. And that's not what we want in the United States of America. That's not what we want in a free country. We've got to focus on this. We've got to figure out a way where the playing field can be leveled in terms of anyone who is a serious candidate actually has a shot at being elected. I mean, think of that. If things were throughout history the way they are today in the world of campaign finance, a person like Abraham Lincoln could never have a shot of being elected because he could never have raised enough money. And that's very, very sad. How many other great leaders and statesmen are there out there that can't run or give up on running because they know they couldn't raise $100 million? And that's sad that you have to actually buy the office, that we can't find the best people out there to run regardless of their economic or personal financial situation. But we want to continue talking about all of these issues, but realize that all of these issues in large or in small part hang or hinge on campaign finance reform. We've got to make campaign finance reform our #1 priority, or everything else is really a moot point or certainly lessened in our effectiveness.